Good morning, everybody, and welcome to TCCA 2020. My name is Joshua Hicks, and I will be your host for today's session, along with my co-host, Miss Leah Salinas, who is at home because we're in a different kind of year this year. And we're happy to be here to introduce the first of the breakout sessions. And in this room, we have Tisha Poncio. Did I say that right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Good. And she's gonna take it away, and I hope everybody enjoys. Looks like we got 19 people out there, so it'll grow. They're all leaving Michael Bonner right now. So.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Welcome.
Thank you all for joining this morning. I'm so excited to be with you. I was just saying that typically I'm not a morning person, but when I get to hang out with my TCCA family or any educators anywhere around the world, it energizes me. So I'm really excited to be with you guys today. If you do not know me, I'm Tisha Poncio. I'm a digital learning specialist in North Texas. This is my 21st year in education. Previously, I have taught just a plethora of things, English 1 and 2, business computers, programming, multimedia, webmastering, broadcasting. And most recently, I am a digital coach, digital specialist, and I also teach a class of students who are tech student leaders. And so a lot of the things that I learn and practice for coaching my teachers, I use my students, my tech leaders, as guinea pigs. And so a lot of the examples that I show you today are going to come from that classroom. And so today we're talking about creativity, moving from completion, so tasks that are just completion, into creation and really authentic assessments. And so I have a little bit of a choice board for you. So as I share my screen, I am going to give you a couple of choices. So this is going to mean that you probably, if you have a device beside you, hopefully it's a computer, a phone, or an iPad, I actually have some choices here for you. So I have a choice board because I kind of want to get some feedback from you. The first thing I want you to do is choose if you want to go to menti.com. So I have a question over at menti.com. The code is 8472102. I will keep this up. And then I also have a Nearpod. So join.nearpod.com. And the code for Nearpod is DWIZ7. And then I have a Padlet. So I've linked the Padlet here. At the end of the session, you will actually get this entire Wakelet collection with these links and these codes, so you can follow up. If you don't want to do the choice board right now, you can do it later. But the Padlet is /Tisha J Poncio /TCCA20. And what I'm doing over at Menti, Nearpod, and Padlet is I'm actually asking you a couple of questions. So I'm going to leave that up for just a second, but I want to get some feedback on how do you feel when people ask you to create? How often are you allowing your students in your classroom to create on their own? And then I'm actually over on the Nearpod. I want you to draw a picture. And so I want you to choose the medium that you like best. If you just want to go do a survey, Menti is your place. If you want to go through the Nearpod and draw, choose that. If you're great at drawing. And then the Padlet, I've actually given you a choice. You can enter a picture, a meme. You can just write text if you want, but it's very open-ended. So you can do these three little choice boards. If you want to take a screenshot now, you can do that, but you can do this throughout my session. And as I go through and present, I just want you to take note that I'm presenting from Wakelet. And so I'm also really wanting to model for you the way that you can implement Wakelet into the learning or your presenting styles. So the Nearpod was DWIZ7. And so we have Heather over there. And then we have the Padlet, so you can see some previous answers to how do you feel when you're asked to create. So it looks like some people are very stressed out. And then we have some people who are really excited. And then over at Menti, we have a question. How often are you allowing your students to create each week? This is very important. I'm going to come back and look at this data, but this is really important. What I want you to do here is I really just want you to sit with your answer for a little bit. I want you to think through how you're allowing them to create, and just think of ways that you can flip the script on their learning. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as we move on. So I'm going to go back over to the Wakelet. Again, if you want to screenshot this now, you absolutely may, but we'll come back to it and look at your responses in just a little bit. So I want to talk about the design thinking process. And if you are not familiar with this, I hope you are, but if you're not, take some time to research this, jot a note down in your notes or on your phone and come back to this, because the design thinking process for me really changed how I taught. It really changed how I even coached my teachers. One of the things with design thinking, and you can see this is actually a picture of our whiteboard in my classroom. And we have a student, Dane, who likes to just come in my room and draw. So I let him, and I keep his drawings up all year. But design thinking really teaches the students that it's okay to make mistakes. It also teaches me that it's okay to make a mistake. I think there is a misconception in school these days that, and with the students especially, they come to school and they think they cannot make mistakes, that there's no room for mistakes, and that they have to make 100s or 90s or A's in order to feel successful. But with design thinking, I've really been able to teach my own students and my teachers that we are trying to solve a problem, and we have to come up with possible solutions, right? So there is a way, not the way. You will hear me talk about that very often. I tell my students there's a way, not the way. If I want to teach them something and they're going to study, they're all going to study it differently. They're all going to implement it differently. And so with design thinking and that whole process, I'm able to really walk them through. And even though they feel uncomfortable, because I know creating for a lot of us, me especially, it makes me feel uncomfortable because I don't feel adequately equipped to create. And it's because I'm not doing it enough. So the other thing with design thinking is that I've taught my students and myself and my teachers to be open to peer feedback, because as you are solving a problem and you're coming up with possible solutions and the process for that, and once you implement it, you know if it's going to work or it's not. And usually what students do is if it's not working, they give up. Me also, like I feel that. And so what I like to do with them is I like for them then to get peer feedback. Why did it not work? What would have worked better? So this really, for me, in my coaching and in my teaching, no matter who I'm teaching or who I'm coaching, this is really the basis and the foundation for how I approach things. So I keep this up all year because I want my students, I want it to be ingrained in their brains, and what they see is what they do. So that is why I keep this up. I have pictures of it everywhere, and I remind them when we're approached with a problem that this is the process we're going to take. So now I want to introduce you to some really cool things. Recently, I've been using Jamboard, and there was not really a lot of hype that I was seeing with Jamboard until remote learning. And everybody was asking for a whiteboard, and how can we implement a whiteboard, and how can I have my students actually do their math problems and show me their process. And so with our iPads, we actually are allowing our students to use Jamboard. You can see that they can share their Jamboard. They can download it as a PDF. This is a key for all of my iPad users. They've been saving it as an image, and then they can upload it to like a learning management assignment. I love that there's a presentation piece here because they can continue to add frames. And it gives them graphing paper and dotting paper, and there's different colors, and there's sticky notes. And the truth is there's so many ways to collaborate. Tony Vincent, this is his graphic. I love following him. If you don't follow him, you definitely need to, because he has so many great tips for you and your students on creating videos, creating graphics. But this has been a huge thing for my teachers, and they've all gotten on board with it. And, like anything else, that it's little by little, not all of them are experts in it, but I think if you're not using Jamboard for creativity, you need to check it out. And before you even implement it with your students, my coaching advice is always for you to use it first. So think of some ways that you can use Jamboard before you ever try to allow your students to do it, just so you're a little bit familiar with it. Of course, I want to remind you, you do not have to be an expert in all of these apps. I am not an expert in everything I'm showing you. Everything I am showing you today is actually implemented by my students. And so I have great stories for you on how my students taught me to use some of these apps. So remember, it's okay for your students to teach you as well. So Holly, my friend Holly Clark, she has these Jamboard templates. And if you have not looked at these Jamboard templates, you need to. I've put this collection here. Remember, at the end of my session, you actually will get the Wakelet link for this entire collection. So you'll have access to all of it. But follow Holly Clark if you don't already, but definitely check out her Jamboard templates. I love using templates, and I love when people share those. I have some for you today. So if you're in any of my sessions, I will share those. But I think it just helps you kind of envision what other people are doing, and then you can apply what they're doing to what you're doing in your own classrooms. So I've given you that. Now I really want to talk about this. Here is one of the most incredible presentations I've ever presented on with a second grade teacher. So shout out to Brittany Rummage in Salina, Texas, because she and I collaborated. She came to me and said, you know, Tisha, I want to do Flipgrid, and I really don't know how to best implement it. And so we looked at Flipgrid and her TEKS and her learning objectives. And so she has put together this incredible second grade state research project presentations. So she actually asked her students to research a state. You can see some of the things she's asking her students right here. And then she expects her students at the very end of that research to put everything together into a Flipgrid. So I'm not actually going to play this video for you today just because of sound. We do have Luke's permission to share this globally. So when you get the Wakelet collection, you'll be able to go listen to Luke, who is an incredible student leader. And you can see, though, just by this freeze frame that he has incorporated pictures. He's pulled in his state, some football stars on here, and he is practicing public speaking. As you watch this, you'll see that she's actually, and if you are a second grade teacher or an elementary teacher, please reach out to me. My email will be on here. I will share that session, because the incredible thing about this Flipgrid creative research project presentation is I believe she hits 25 to 30 of her learning goals and objectives, and it's cross-curricular what she's done. And so I really just want you to think about layering things. A lot of times we're just using one app, but it is possible to hit multiple learning goals and objectives when you allow your students to do the researching, the info literacy, the creating. They're also practicing digital citizenship. She also had them reply to each other after they had uploaded their videos to ask questions. So this project right here is one of my very favorite creativity projects. So I would love to share that with you. I have that on another Wakelet collection. And Brittany and I do not mind sharing what we presented in the summer to our own district. So just make sure to make a note and email me. The next thing I want to talk about is social emotional learning. So here's what I'm finding. I'm finding that a lot of people know that they have to hit social and emotional learning. And so, but not everybody understands social and emotional learning. And I really I'm pulling a very personal example. You can see this is actually my son, Jace. And he, in the very beginning of remote learning, where we were, on lockdown and isolated, he's a childhood cancer survivor. So we've been super careful with him. And in the very beginning, he was feeling very isolated and alone, and things were very uncertain. And so as, fifth grade boys, 10-year-old boys, they really don't want to talk about what they're feeling. So I just gave him his Chromebook after logging into Bunsey. And I said, I know you're not feeling great, but why don't you show me how you're feeling? And so I think sometimes we get wrapped up in the idea that everything has to be very structured in order to hit that social and emotional learning. But sometimes our students, sometimes our own kids, sometimes we just need to create how we're feeling instead of talking about it. And so I've included this in here. I'll just run through it really quickly. He was very lonely, so he put raindrops, which indicated he was lonely and sad. And then he told me he was sad and depressed. And then this one, he was scared. And then we started talking about who his safe people were and things that made him happy, and made him feel better. And so we really went through a process with this as he was creating. We never really talked about anything, but it gave me insight into how I needed to affirm his emotions, and also how I could remind him that even in times of stress, we still have ways to cope and really get through that. And as you can see, the truth is just us being together today for TCCA is one of those things. Having your safe people, having your PLN there. So that is another way to just, it's open-ended, right? How are you feeling? Tell me what you do to make you feel better. I think we need to do check-ins with students more often in this way. And I will just give you a tip, even in high school. So I know Bunsey gets, a lot of times people think it's just for elementary students, but I have one student at the high school who has set her timer every day for, I believe it's 12 or 12:10. And she calls it her Bunsey creativity timer. And so she's even conditioned me now to know that at 12 or 12:10, she is going to do a brain break. She's going to create. So she's come into class, she's put her things down, she's looked at Google Classroom, and that is my indication also that she needs a break. So I remember she needs a break. So she'll go create a Bunsey. And sometimes the Bunsey really, there is no actual purpose. She just wants to create. She wants to draw. She wants to see colors and put them together. And so she's actually created some really incredible things. And through that creativity break, that social emotional check-in that I have with her, she actually is running for state thespian officer. And one of their tasks this last week was to create graphics. And so now that she feels comfortable doing that, she's able to apply that to something that really is meaningful to her. Next, I want to talk about showcasing talent and growth. This is a student Wakelet collection. So I'm going to go ahead and see if we can get that to load. This is a collection from another SWAT student that I have. And what happened, she did the exact same thing. She was just creating graphics to create graphics, but that evolved into something much bigger over the course of time. So Honora, she has written a blog for Bunsey before. She's also a global student leader with Jennifer Casa-Todd. They have a session coming up this week. So I would love for you to tune in, reach out for more info on that. But Honora I'm going to scroll down because I want you to see what Honora started with. She started with this marching band creation and this tree right here. But you can see over time, she started applying it to her Twitter header. So she started going into Canva and really being creative. And then she started applying it to her actual schoolwork. And she was asking her teachers, and her teachers were giving projects, and they were saying, put together a Google slide. And she said, do I have to do Google slide? Can I do a Bunsey? Can I do a Canva? Can I do an Adobe Spark page? So she started asking, and I feel like in that way, she really started advocating for her learning. And she also really made her teachers aware that there were other tools out there to create with. One of her teachers emailed me and asked me about Bunsey. Is it, can the students create on that? Do we have it on the iPads? And I said, yes. And so that was one of their projects that they got to do, I believe, in a physics class. So you can see now she's creating resumes, and she's creating officer tryout portfolios, and she's even advocating in her community. So what I love about Honora's little graphics, it started off very small, but I think what happens is when we give students the time to really create and see what they can do, it empowers them in a way that we just never know. And I think the same thing can be said for us as educators, right? A lot of times it's easier to take what somebody else has created and just implement that. But when we start creating things for our classrooms, it does the same thing. It empowers us as educators. So next, I want to share this little challenge that my friend Laura Steinbrink, shout out Laura, she taught me this when I did a social emotional learning webinar with Bunsey. It's called the Bob Ross Challenge. Now I'm going to be really honest with you. I am not super creative, but Laura says that her self-rule is to be creative at least once a day. So I've really tried to implement that since the summer. She has done these Bob Ross challenges. This actually was an idea by Sean Farnham. Here is his Twitter account if you want to go follow him. But here is a Bob Ross challenge. And the idea is that you take a Bob Ross painting and then you go over into an app, Bunsey or Google Slides or Adobe Spark, really wherever you want to go, and you recreate that Bob Ross painting. Now, I'm going to be truthful. For me, that's difficult. I have these, so I don't know, you guys, I have these brush markers, these Tombow brush markers. So for me, I have a coloring book over here. Sometimes I want to move away from the digital creativity and I just want to go to the old school creativity. So I do some coloring to try to get out of my head and get off of the computer. But this is a great idea. You could implement this in your classroom. You could implement this as a coach with your teachers. I know Monday at my school, we actually have an in-service day. And I was trying to come up with ideas for my teachers, like music playlists, allowing them to create when they come in to meet with me for a couple of minutes. So this is just another example of something you can do with your students. Here's one other little painting. Next, now, this is why you want the Wakelet link, because I want you to go watch these. I'm not going to play these one because I know this is being recorded and streamed. And so I do not want to violate copyright. But what I've done with my teachers and my students, at least once a year, I do this. I do this with really with all of them, to learn more about them, because asking them about their song for life tells me a little bit about where they are. But for my students, I really just want to see what they can create. And so I want you to take a note and go back and look at this video, because this is Julie. And she actually, you can see the lighting is iffy. The background is also iffy. And really all you're going to see is she's walking across the screen waving. But then I had her do another one. Most recently, I believe the spring. You can see by the little screen capture here, the freeze frame, that already you can tell Julie's being more creative. She has a costume going with her video now. She has an instrument. I see the TV in the background. I really want you to go watch this, because what you're going to see is in her first video, you're going to be like, oh. But then you're going to see her second video where I said, I want you to be very creative. I want you to think outside the box. There are no limits here. It really was kind of eye-opening to me at what she did using Flipgrid. So again, because of copyright, I'm not going to play the music, but I definitely want you to come back here and I want you to watch that and see the comparison. I also want to note that you need to come watch this video from Blake. So if you have students, and I'm finding that there are more and more of them who are introverts in the back of the classroom, students who are not wanting to ask questions, students who just, kind of want to be invisible. I'm also seeing a lot of students being online learners and being very vocal online. But then when they come back to school, they're sort of reverting back into that introverted state. So my student, he has now graduated and is in college, but Blake, he never said anything. And I know some of you have already seen this, but I want to share it because I think it's a very good example. He created a music video on this Flipgrid, and he didn't say a single word, but he has conveyed his emotion. He made us laugh in this video. And I think, again, making it open-ended and sort of letting go of those boundaries I think you're going to find that your students, I always say students can lead in any situation as long as you give them that opportunity. And so I think Blake and Julie, their videos really showcase that. So I definitely want you to go back and watch those. Next, I want you to know that you have access to this video response rubric that I've made. Now, I made this several years ago, but I still get people who ask me for access to it. So I've linked that. And this video response rubric is, you can make a copy. I'm telling you guys, I always give you what I have. Make a copy. You can change this up depending on how your students are creating. Maybe you want it to be a graphic creation rubric. You can go in and change that. So I'm giving you that with this Wakelet collection. And then I want to follow up and remind you, like I said earlier, creativity does not always mean digital. Julie's twin sister, Jill, had a project for art where they were required to make a name tag that would hang above their desk. And they had requirements, right? So there is still requirements, but you know, she was like, it has to fit in a Pringles chip storage can. That was, for me, I thought that was a genius idea. So Jill sent me pictures of her name tag that she made for her art class. And she showed me how it could fit into the Pringles can. So just remember that your students being creative, it does not all have to be digital. Just remember that. Let them work with their hands. Let them create something incredible. Next, I'm going to talk about this ELA book creation. This is another example of Anora. So I talked about Anora and her graphics sort of portfolio. Well, her teacher, ELA teacher, obviously had them put together the Count of Monte Cristo projects. I don't have that rubric or those guidelines and objectives for you, but Anora said to her teacher, I really just want to put together my project in a Wakelet. So her teacher said, okay. And through that process, she answered the questions and put together what she needed to put together for that class. But she also was able to show her teacher that she could be creative and it didn't have to just be a Google slide like everybody else. So this one's very basic and very simple. But the great thing, and I'm talking about Wakelet next session, the great thing about Wakelet is even if your students are 13 or younger, you still have the ability to allow them to create a presentation. And I'll show you more about that later. Next, I want to talk about podcasting. And this is a personal story. So my students wanted to put together a podcast last year. That was their goal in 2019. So the goal was by the end of 2020, they wanted to have a podcast. I bought a microphone. I got all the equipment ready. And then we never came back to school. So I wasn't sure how we were going to make the podcasting thing a reality, but with the help of some great people on my PLN and my students, they actually put together and created their episode 1 podcast. So I've linked that here. And when you click on that Wakelet collection, it will give you all of the show notes. So they wanted specifically to use Wakelet for show notes. I asked them, do you want this on your website? Which they create their website as well. But they wanted to use Wakelet because it was easy to showcase. And so they've put together their Spotify link and their Anchor link and all of their show notes here so that you have access to everything they've talked about. The thing is, I honestly, truthfully did not think that they would be able to launch this, especially when we are all in lockdown. But the truth is, like every other time when I give them the ability to lead and I kind of back up and let go of that teacher control that I like to have, they really blow me away. And so here is the script that they wrote. They put together the script in Google Docs. They wrote out everything that needed to happen. And you can even see that they're telling me what I need to be responsible for. So they've written my script here. So when you hear me on this podcast, I didn't write the script. They told me, Poncio, this is what you're saying. This is what we want you to do. This is what you're responsible for. And so I've given you access to their script as well. You definitely could do this in a smaller capacity and use Flipgrid. I know lots of people are using Flipgrid for class and student podcasts. I just think that's a great outlet for your students. You know, they're writing the script, they're using their skills for writing. Then you're letting them create and put together, and you're also letting them use their voice. What an empowering combination. And so they have 2 episodes, just so you know, when you go to those links, they have 2 episodes. And because we've been so busy kind of reacclimating ourselves to being back in the classroom this fall, we don't have our episode 3 yet, but they have it written. They have the script written, and hopefully we can get that launched before Christmas this year. So lastly, I really want to talk about choice boards. I have given you 2 choice boards here, and one is actually a teacher learning menu that I used for my teachers. So you have access to both of these. One of these is reading response choice board. Morgan Cave, shout out Morgan, sent this to me, and I love it so much that I wanted to showcase it. So I want you to have that. And I also have this teacher learning menu in Google Docs that you can use, make a copy, you can adapt that. But I think it's very important if you're a digital coach out there, make sure that you are allowing your teachers to sit in the chair of the students. Allow them the space and the time to create so that they can understand what it feels like to be in that student perspective. And then that way, when they're implementing those things in their classroom, they have that perspective and that empathy with the students, especially those students like me, who, when you tell me to create something, I'm probably going to sit there with my crayons and cry because it's so stressful. But I think it's just stressful because I didn't have a lot of those opportunities growing up. And I thought because I wasn't naturally great at it, that I just couldn't do it. And that's not the case. We want to definitely empower our students to know that really anything is possible if they just keep trying. So I've posted that I use Adobe Spark a lot, and I put this graphic in here because I want to remind you that when your students are creating, no matter what they're creating for you, they're telling a story, and stories are powerful, and stories become outlets for them to deal with that stress. So also that social emotional piece comes in with that creativity. Canva is a really big hit. I will tell you, my students really love Canva. And I always encourage teachers and students both. I know that we get really comfortable in what we're using to create. So I'm very comfortable in Adobe Spark. And if you tell me to use something else like Canva, I'm going to say I really don't want to. But what I encourage myself and my students and my teachers to do is move a little bit outside of that comfort zone, right? Move into creating an iMovie maybe, or learn how to create a GIF. Maybe you call it a GIF, but it's actually GIF. We can debate that on Twitter later. But create something simple and kind of move yourself out of that comfort zone, because I believe that whatever you're modeling for yourself is going to be a model for the students as well. So those are the things that my students and I debate about a lot, Adobe Spark versus Canva. They both have really great qualities. You can see I use both of them. So I'm going to list for you a list of creativity tools in just a second. But I want to talk, I'm going to end on this. So I know I'm running low on time. Want to make sure you get to your next session and all of that. But I've linked the CISD SWAT Instagram here. And I added this at the last minute last night. It's because, and let's see if this opens here. I haven't tested this, but I want to see if it will open, because I want to talk to you. First of all, my students, they run their own social media accounts. I think anybody that knows me knows that they're doing that. We're talking about digital citizenship all the time. We're talking about professional use of social media. We're talking about marketing and creativity. And as you scroll through, probably some of you are going to notice the difference in their posts. So, you know, we post graphics here and little reminders and all about our podcast. But if you aren't familiar with these graphics, I will tell you that these most recent videos right here are from TikTok. And Josh and I were talking before we went live that sometimes I believe TikTok gets a really bad rap, but I think that has been the trend for every social media platform that has ever existed. When Facebook first became popular, I was teaching in the classroom and my students would not get off of Facebook. So I got on Facebook to try to figure out why they loved it so much. Then all the parents got on, right? Then the students moved to Twitter. So then we all moved to Twitter. And then the students moved to Instagram. And then there we all were on Instagram. I find this trend so often with parents. And I know it's a hot topic on Twitter because I've read all of the tweets and comments about it recently. But here's what happened with my own students. They came to me and first they asked, Ms. Poncio, we really want to create a TikTok for SWAT. And so I always say as a teacher, you have to know your boundaries, right? Like I don't want to give them, I want to give them space, but I was not for the TikTok account. So I said, no, we're not creating a SWAT TikTok account. We have a Snapchat and an Instagram and a Twitter account. That's enough to run. But then they decided, hey, Ms. Poncio, we really want to create TikToks using our own accounts, but we want to post those on Instagram. And so you'll notice that they have created, Honora and Brady have created different TikToks here. Most recently, they taught me about TikTok, and you can see there is my head. And they taught me really that TikTok has its own language. There are different sides of TikTok. There are I don't know, just like these secret rules that if you're on TikTok, you understand, but if you aren't on TikTok, it makes no sense whatsoever. So I encourage you to go look at these videos that they've created. Know that if you hear a megaphone voice with a certain music playing in the background, like that means something. It's like a meme, how a meme used to be like an inside joke kind of thing. It's kind of like that, but I'm always very intrigued. But the other piece of that is I want to encourage them to keep creating. So sometimes I get wrapped into creating with them, as long as it's all school appropriate, which this is. So I've linked their Instagram here for you so you can go watch that. Definitely ask them questions if you have any, because they love to engage on Instagram. I've also linked for you tools for educators and students. So Google tools are great, Google Draw, but especially Google Jamboard now. Nearpod, we're going to look at that again in a second. Padlet, Mentimeter, Flipgrid, Buncee, Canva, Adobe Spark. We used Anchor for our podcast. If you want help with that, or you want to, contact me, I can give you tips on that. Flat Icon and Coolers, they are learning a lot about hexadecimal codes. So I'm teaching them about that. And then if you need to contact me, I created this little business card in Buncee. Super easy. All my information is here. And I believe if you click on it, it links out. So let's go look at these Nearpods. So I'm going to actually hide the student name. Let's see if we can do that. Okay. Everybody's waiting. So I'm now starting the activity. So I apologize for not doing that sooner. So Heather, Rebecca, Elizabeth, Doris, Christine, all of everybody that's on here, you guys can now go draw. While you're drawing, I'm going to go look and see if anybody added to the Padlet, which is okay if you didn't. Remember, this is a choice board. So somebody added, yeah. I love that you're so excited about that. I always go back to this little girl with the crayon crying. This is honestly my 2020 meme right here. This is how I felt for a lot of the 2020 time. And then let's look at this. We have every day. So we have 10% of people who fill this out say every day. Some people say, you guys are doing great, actually. I'm very impressed. I had 10 people fill this out. And so honestly, this is incredible results. This makes me so happy. So anything that you have new that you want to share with me that you're doing with your students, I would love to hear that. I also would love to know if you have any questions. I know that there is a chat box, so just post any questions. I know Josh is checking that out. Also, I believe Josh is going to give you the Wakelet link specifically to this Wakelet from completion to creation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but expect me to probably post your Nearpod drawings on Twitter later because I still want to see those. Heather and Rebecca and Dora, you guys are all in progress. So I definitely want to see those. And so Josh, what questions do we have?
Okay, so we're we haven't really had a whole lot.
Okay, everybody's still waking up, right?
I guess.
I think there's a couple of people that just wanted your links to the Wakelet and Nearpod and Mentimeter.
So
Perfect.
I've shared the creativity one twice. I didn't share the Wakelet one. I got confused.
No, you're good. You're good. The creativity link is the one we want to share now. The Wakelet link is for the next session, Josh, on the back end. Okay.
Good.
So the creativity link is definitely the one that they're going to need. They're going to have access to the student Instagram account so they can go look at the TikTok examples. They're going to have access to the Nearpod, the Mentimeter, the Padlet. They have my email address. I love to talk creativity and just wrapping up. I want you to remember something that I'm having to remember right now. I shared with Josh earlier. My students yesterday, we had a little bit of downtime during lunch and they were wanting to play Among Us. And I had been waiting for my son, who's in 5th grade, to teach me how to play Among Us. So if you guys don't know about this game, you need to go look it up because it's very popular right now. It reminds me, Josh, of like old school video games back then. Like that, it's a very intriguing. Okay, but I get on this game. And one, they're really like floored that 4 teachers are in my room during lunchtime learning about Among Us. That alone is really kind of flooring them because they're usually teachers are like, absolutely not. No, you can't play this, right? But here we are letting them teach us. It is not easy, Josh. It's not easy. No. That is what I learned. TikTok is not easy. It takes a lot of critical thinking skills to do both of those. But I always encourage all of you out there to remember to never stop learning and still be a student, even when your students are teaching you. So that's really what I want to leave you with today.
And somebody just asked to put the link in the chat. So there it is.
Okay.
Give it a few seconds to load. And they're asking where they can find them. They're currently at the bottom of the screen. So if you just take a picture with your phone, and then, or you can copy and paste from the chat box. I do want to warn you, I have to take the lower third, which is what this is called, at the bottom down in a second, because you need your super secret password. We want to make sure everybody gets credit. And the way you get that credit is a link will be sent through the Eventbrite registration system. So if you have not registered on Eventbrite, you may need to make sure you have, so that you can get your email. And the password will be learn. So there it is. Write it down on a piece of paper so that you don't forget. And that is how you will get your credit for attending the sessions. We had about 61 people. And I have a question because we do have, looks like 3 minutes.
Okay.
Design learning.
Yes.
Talk about that for a little bit because I am huge into design learning and design-based learning in creativity, especially with GT students.
Absolutely. Well, I will tell you, I really didn't implement that, Josh, until the last couple of years. But what it has really done is it has made the learning much more cohesive. We all are doing the same process. The interesting thing is it's even taught me that is naturally what I go to now. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? So sometimes I go backwards, right? If I take my learning objective and I'm like, okay, I want my students to understand portfolios and resumes, for example, and professional social media accounts, that's going to be the end goal. And then I kind of go backwards from that. So the design thinking helps me really take those learning goals and then take the activities that I'm having my students do so that it is all very cohesive, but I don't make it easy enough so that they, one, can cheat. That's really the thing with design thinking, right? There isn't necessarily a right answer. Maybe there are a group of right answers, and maybe I didn't know that this particular solution wouldn't work. I think it's just really about critical thinking, which is what I wanted my students to learn. I also want my teachers to learn how to implement that in their classrooms. So this, going from completing a Google form for a test, as opposed to show me on your iPad using Google Jamboard how to solve that problem and what thought process are you going to, so that now we can discuss and reflect on the learning. And as an educator, I can give you feedback. I mean, honestly, it really is the most powerful thing I've ever done as an educator, Josh. So I recommend everybody to start reading about it, studying it, getting with people who know about it. Yeah, it honestly, I have it in my classroom, and I actually have a learning lab for teachers and then a SWAT classroom, and I have it in both places because I also want my teachers to be thinking that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the empathy component. Go ahead.
There's a comment by Catherine Ross. She says, I work in the vocational sector with health students and are searching for creative tools which adult students who are not really techie can feel comfortable with.
Okay. Adult students who are not techie. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, what was her name again? I'm writing this down because I want to connect with
Catherine Ross.
Catherine. Does Catherine, if you have a Twitter account, honestly, I know we're running out of time. So I would love to actually talk to you because ironically, I have a meeting with my teacher at the high school who is doing the same thing. She's kind of health services, health sciences. I'm meeting with her on Monday, and I would love to give you some of the tips that I'm going to share with her. So I would love for you to reach out to me. So if Catherine could put her email in there, I would love to get that from you guys if that's possible. Because I can even bring her in and we can do a session on Monday with my other teacher that I'm meeting with. I would love to do that, Catherine. I have lots of ideas, but clearly I don't have enough time to go over all of them. But what I want to say before I talk to you, Catherine, is start simple. Right. But again, it's about empowering. And so just using Jamboard, for example, and having the teachers and the adults get used to that. Like I get that hesitance. That's where I started in education, was educating adult students on how to use Word and Excel. So there is a fear there, and I completely understand it myself. So I would say start small. My teachers who were hesitant to use iPads, we just use the Notes app, right? There is a drawing annotation component to that, even on their phones. So I really started very small because you want to get them comfortable so that they will start taking risks.
Okay. And so any other questions? We're sorry we can't get to you. We've got to get Tisha ready for her next session, which is coming up on the hour. Thank everybody for joining. Remember, your super secret password is LEARN, and we appreciate you being here. Take a look at your Eventbrite schedule so that you can pick your next session. We have plenty of them to choose from and some great speakers. Thank you, Tisha. We really appreciate it, and we can't wait to listen in on the next hour.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Josh. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.